Share via email. Report story. By the mistake. Summary. A blizzard leaves Ochako stuck at Izuku's home for the night, forcing them both to confront feelings they would have preferred to leave untouched. Dot. Chapter 1. The lights went out. It was a slow, drawn-out affair, bulbs going dark before climbing weakly back to life, throwing flickering shadows across Ochako's face. Her expression was contorted into one of almost comic surprise as she sat cross-legged, eyebrows up, mouth slightly open. She slowly folded her hand of Uno cards onto the floor of Izuku's living room and rested her hands on her knees as they waited for the power to stabilize. It took 7 seconds of darkness. Izuku counted them in his head, before he realized that the lights weren't going to come back on. Oh no, he groaned, throwing his head back. He tossed his last remaining card down and stumbled to his feet, off balance after rising from the floor, and started taking half steps towards the end table by the couch he'd left his phone on. He got halfway there, arms sweeping out awkwardly at knee level to make sure he didn't hit anything on the way, before Ochako flicked on her own phone's light. Ah, warn me before you do that next time, he said, shoulders tensed in surprise, raising his hand against the glare. I couldn't bear to see you struggling. She grinned, teasing. You were gonna hurt yourself, and then I'd have to eat you when there's no mochi left. A smile flashed across his face and promptly disappeared when the concern of running out of food registered. His eyebrows drew together as he focused into the middle distance and rested his chin on his hand, lips moving almost silently, as he started doing calculations. They were dead center in the middle of the worst blizzard in Japan this century. They'd been inside for 3 hours already, playing board games and alternately watching the news and the snow as it continued to fall. At this point, the soft powder was nearly touching the bottom of the windowsill, and it showed no sign of stopping. He only snapped out of his reverie when a small, calloused hand waved inches from his nose. Earth to Deku, Ochako said cheerily. I don't think we have to worry about running out of food. Between you and your mom, this place is stocked like a doomsday bunker. Izuku flushed. We just like to be prepared is all. Especially in the winter, even if no one really knew it was going to get this bad. And since All Might and I finally persuaded her to go on a vacation, she wanted to make sure that I had enough food while she was gone. Because she would worry about me otherwise, and, well, I guess she's worried about me anyway now, huh? He finished, stopping short guiltily. He thought back to the harried conversation he'd had, tinny on a long-distance call, reassuring his panic-stricken mom that he was okay and not dead in a car accident, or from a derailed train, and that no villains with weather manipulation quirks were assaulting the city. I promise everything's okay, Mom. Don't worry about me, it's a mother's right to worry, Izuku. Oh, I can't bear thinking about you alone with that storm covering the city. What if something happens? It'll be fine. Everything's pretty snowed over, but the weather isn't violent or anything. Besides, he hesitated, peering back into the living room, where his friend stood with her hip cocked to the side, one hand resting on it as the other rummaged through the closet for board games. I'm, not alone. Uraraka was coming over to get notes from a day of school she missed and got stuck. Promoted stories. You'll also like. The Kings and Queen Yandere Wakfu X Reader, 55.8K 1.8 Kyonder. Wakfu X Reader. Images do not belong to me unless stated. Wakfu does not belong to me, it belongs to Enigma. This is being rewritten in another book on my profile. Izuku's Harem Academia 184K 1.7 Cust. Read. Ohm fluke a day 112K 8.2 kiloamperes. Collection of short Ohm fluke over 365 days. Please check the second book for the rest of the day's update. Hurt cuz I love you to death Izuocha. Ha. 8.6K 141 Class 1A is now Class 2A and is working to be better heroes due to events that had happened before. Deku has gotten strong feelings toward Uraraka during the summer as Convicted Hearts 3420 like my other story but ILI longer. Much needed love Yandere Succubus Momo X Izu 50.1K 776 after Wattpad had decided to delete this story out of nowhere. I and many reader were distraught. So I'm making a remake of the story from the ground up to compensate. Her prince from the underworld, half demon is 0.25.6K 450. It's basically the same story as my Succubus Momo X Deku story. I know, real original but hey, now you guys get a Deku from the other side of the tracks. Good. With finality at first, then amended. Well, not good, the poor girl. But she looks out for you and she's got a solid head on her shoulders and I can't think of any of your friends I'd rather be stuck with you in a crisis situation. It's not a crisis situation, Mom, and do you have enough food? Make sure you offer her some. I will. I'll keep you posted, but don't worry too much, okay? Try to enjoy your vacation. I feel terrible about how much I've made you worry with the league and everything, and his arm had flapped uselessly at his side as he tried to think of the right words. I love you. I love you too, Izuku. Keep me updated, and be a good host for that girl. She's something else. She's the only person I've met who might be as sweet as you. And she's cute too. Ooh. She finished, tone on the verge of teasing. Be bye, Mom. Goodbye, Izuku. Deku. He snapped back to the present, realizing abruptly that Ochako was peering up at him from not more than 2 feet away, nose scrunched as she stared at him inquisitively. She is cute, he thought for a second, before the closeness hit him in the base of his gut like a freight train and he nearly fell backward trying to put space between them. Oh, she seemed to recognize their proximity at the same moment he did, and took a cursory half step back as well, already pink cheeks tinging a shade darker. What were you thinking about? Just my mom. Izuku sighed, recovering with a speed that he was almost proud of and looking down. I feel bad about how much she's had to sacrifice and worry ever since I started at UA and the one time I got her to feel secure enough to relax, the biggest snowstorm in years hits. He made a face. What about your parents? They worried about you being stuck here. I think it's sweet how much your mom cares. Mine are a little worried, but she shook her phone, the light from it juddering around the room. I've been texting them and I think I got them convinced I'm not gonna do anything too dumb. Plus, they like you. I think they're mostly just glad I'm good enough friends with someone to have a safe place to stay until the blizzard's over. She paused, shoulders hunching. Thank you. By the way, she looked small and shy, and the contrast of that hesitance with the strength he knew she had did something funny to his stomach. Izuku suddenly realized that the light from her phone illuminated them and not much else. It felt like they were standing in space, blackness all around, as if the two of them were the only things that existed. He swallowed heavily and started heading to the kitchen for some candles, retreating, you coward. He thought, and shook his head. It's no problem. He called back. What do you mean, though? Quote dot. About your parents being glad. Oh, I, well, I never had many friends before coming to UA, she admitted. Weirdly enough, she looked more comfortable saying that than thanking him. Her shoulders were back again, chest up as she strode after him into the kitchen, holding the light steady as he searched through drawers. He stopped, looking over his shoulder at her. Ochako Uraraka. She was kind, and clever, and funny, and brave, and she had an amazing quirk, not to mention, nope. He shut off that line of thought before it could get started, turning back to the drawer and finally singling out two half-melted candles tucked forlornly at the back. Whatever she was, or wasn't, he couldn't imagine people not wanting to spend time with her, and for some stupid reason he needed to let her know that. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's not like I think you're lying or anything, it's just that I look forward to hanging out with you all the time, and, I mean, you're like my best friend, but, Izuku trailed off, grimacing and grabbing the candles with a nervous, hurried motion like he was about to take them and run out the front door into the snow. Maybe he should. Neither of them had ever actually quantified their relationship like that before. It was readily apparent to anyone paying attention that they spent roughly half their waking hours together, but in spite of that, or maybe because of it, she was always cagey about admitting it. Hell, he was too. He slammed the drawer closed, nearly taking off the tip of his finger as he spun back around to see her looking at him like she'd been hit with something heavy. It was weird to hear it said. She knew objectively that they spent way too much time with each other to just be friendly. They'd been hanging out all the time recently. She knew the sound of his laugh like a favorite song, and he was the only person short of her parents who could tell when she was just pretending to smile. He was the last person she texted at night, and when she woke up she could more often than not count on a cheery message from him waiting for her. Nevertheless, it made her stomach flutter to hear him say it, like she was special. Ochako, is everything okay? Izuku's mouth was pursed in concern, his eyes soft as he moved closer to her. Too close, actually, she felt like she was going to burn up. She waved a hand at him and put on a smile. Of course, sorry, I was just thinking. I don't know, I feel like I was always just a little bit different than the people I went to middle school with. Like I cared about other things, or wanted something more, you know. She frowned, and not having much money didn't help either. Maybe if I were rich, I'd have been able to swing. Eccentric, but as it was, I was just a weirdo. She stuck her tongue out at him as if to emphasize that fact, and he smiled at her shyly. That's fine by me, I was a weirdo too. Well, I guess I kinda still am. No way. She protested, raising her arms in a fighting stance like she was about to hit him for suggesting it. You're super cool. She threw a punch, mimicking the determined expression he wore when he fought. Smash! His face broke out into an embarrassed smile. Thanks, Ochako. It's true. And hold on, I'll help you with those. She took a candle from him, freeing him to grab a lighter from the countertop. Izuku lit the one he was holding, and she shut off her phone's light as the kitchen was bathed in a guttering glow. I should probably save my battery. I was checking the news and they say the snow might not melt for another day or two, and who knows how long the power is going to be off. Izuku made a small noise of agreement in the back of his throat. I know we have a lot more candles around here somewhere, but I think we can live with just these two for now, right? Here, let me. He stepped close to her again, and she froze at the nearness, breath getting shallow as the lighter clicked once, twice, three times before a jet of warm orange flame sputtered out the tip. He cupped a hand around it as he lit the candle, and the scar tissue there shone, reflecting the light back. His sleeve was rolled up and she could see his forearm, broad and strong from exercise and marked with little scars. He was warm. The heat in his home had gone out 10 minutes ago, but she hadn't recognized the chill in the air until she felt the warmth from his body radiating into her. She wondered fuzzily if it was an aspect of his quirk, like an engine running too hot, and she caught herself thinking about whether he was this cozy when he slept and flushed red. The lighter clicked off, and it snapped her out of her thoughts. Izuku was looking down at her, still close, lips quirked in a smile. His face was less than a foot from hers, and she was absolutely certain that she was going to die right there. You okay, Ochako? I might be rubbing off on you. You look like you're somewhere else, he said, and he chuckled, deep in his throat and surprisingly low, and holy shit, she was going to combust. She opened her mouth to say something. What? She didn't know, because for some reason every intelligible thought she'd ever had been replaced with static and the slant of his smile as he grinned at her. But his eyes widened, and he backpedaled away from her as he realized how close they were. Sorry, Izuku stammered out, leaving her clutching one of the candles as he snatched the other one. I probably should have just taken that from you and lit it myself, but you were already holding it and I was kind of crying earlier, which is a bad habit of mine, and I'm really sorry if I made you uncomfortable. I'm going to head back to the living room now. He ducked his head at her in something halfway between a bow and a nod and backed out of the kitchen, the candle in his fist heralding his departure as the light retreated down the hallway. Ochako leaned back against the countertop, her knees weak, trying to get her breath under control. Even though the air was getting colder, her skin felt flushed as if she'd just gotten done running a mile, and she fanned her face with a hand, closing her eyes and exhaling slowly. She stayed there for a while, till her heart had stilled in her chest, and her legs had stopped feeling rubbery, and she could go 10 seconds without thinking about every fleck of color in the green of his eyes. Something was very wrong with her stomach, like she tried to use her quirk on something too heavy, and she didn't know what she was going to do. Hiding in the kitchen forever sounded good, but she knew it wouldn't help her. What's more, there in the dark with nothing but a flickering candle to distract her, she was having a tough time pushing away thoughts of what it would be like to get that close to him again. She shook her head and blew out a puff of air. Get a hold of yourself. You aren't going to make a very good hero if you get distracted by someone standing next to you. Even if he is really cute. Her mouth drew into a line as she stiffened her resolve, and she marched after Izuku with a confidence that, almost, let her convince herself that she was okay. Deck you, she called out down the hallway, sing-song and triumphant. You forgot to say Uno when the power went out. You gotta draw. Chapter 2. Ochako beat him with a professional intensity. They played 6 games of Uno, and he lost every single one. How are you so good at this? He protested feebly, and she just giggled in response. He was almost mythically bad at poker, too. You look so guilty every time you're bluffing. Ochako had laughed, sweeping up the little slips of paper they were using as chips and adding them to the veritable hoard she was amassing. Izuku was willing to admit that his poker face might need work, but that explanation fell a little threadbare when she proceeded to kick his ass 4 times in a row in war. Wait, hold on. No, war is literally just luck. How are you beating me at war? A hero always wins, no matter how the odds are stacked against them. She crowed exultantly, her arms emerging from the thick blanket she was wrapped into pose with her hands on her hips like she was on the cover of a comic book. Izuku had to stifle a laugh at that as she started dealing the cards out for a different game. He'd been worried that he had offended her in the kitchen earlier, but she seemed perfectly content now, which was probably a testament to her patience more than anything, considering the fact that he'd snooped into her private life, made a random proclamation that she was his best friend, and invaded her personal space, all in the span of a minute. His face heated up at the memory of the last one. Why did I do that? For a split second, when Ochako had looked up at him after he'd lit her candle, eyes wide, cheeks pink, strand of hair fallen across her face, He wanted to, he didn't know, to hug her or something. He'd wanted to wrap his arms around her and rest his chin on top of her head while she buried her face in the crook of his neck. He'd wanted to feel her pressed up against him, to hold her close and not let go. After he'd left the kitchen, his skin had felt tingly like he'd been using full cowl, static dancing along his arms and down his torso, and as he'd retreated down the hallway he'd had to bite down on his fist to keep from making an inarticulate keening noise. What's my problem? She was a girl, but he could have sworn he'd spent enough time with her to have gotten over it. And besides, he was friends with other girls now, and none of them made him feel like that. Maybe it was nothing to worry about. Despite his absolute incompetence at expressing it, she really was his best friend, and friends hugged all the time, right? It was probably perfectly natural to want to pull her close to him, to tuck her hair behind her ear, thumb brushing over her cheek as he looked into chocolate brown eyes. Izuku flushed. It bore more consideration, but not now. He suddenly noticed that she was looking at him, patiently waiting for him to say something. Ah, 8. Ochako smiled. Go fish. You asked for 8s last time. I guess I'm just not very good at cards, he said, and managed to choke out a laugh. Had he been staring at her? They'd never spent this much time alone together before, certainly not without some other activity to distract them. He'd always known she was pretty, but sitting here in the dark, teasing each other and laughing, talking idly about whatever popped into their heads, he was starting to realize that she might be the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. He had to get a hold of himself. She was his friend. He owed it to her to not freak out or be weird just because she was attractive, even if she was really attractive. She'd said the snow might not melt for another day or two. That's plenty of time to get back to being normal friends, right? They'd moved from cards to chess, which was altogether kinder towards his dignity. The first 3 games, he'd managed to mate her in less than 20 moves. She was starting to get clever though. With her not falling for any of his more obvious gambits, he was only up a knight and 2 pawns. Wait, knight and 1 pawn. She'd taken one of his. When did that happen? He was considering the possibility he'd have to trade his queen when the missing pawn thumped him solidly between the eyes. Blinking through the tears that sprung up involuntarily in response, he caught a blurry vision of Ochako, trying unsuccessfully to tamp down a smile as the pawn went spinning weightlessly through the air towards the ceiling. Come on, you're so much better at this than me. Let's do something else. What? Do you want to play cards again? Aren't you getting tired of beating me? Never. She cheered. We've gotta find a game we have equal footing on, or you're going to own every piece of paper in this house. Ochako pursed her lips in thought, her expression serious as she looked around the room for inspiration. Her eyes seized on a table tucked into the corner where Izuku and his mother ate whenever they wanted to watch TV over dinner. She smiled coyly, which made his chest feel weird, and he realized abruptly that he'd been holding his breath. How about arm wrestling? The suggestion hit him like a thunderbolt. Even without his quirk, his fighting style was much more strength-based than Ochako's. He'd seen her throwing opponents over her hip, gracefully redirecting all their power against them, and felt clumsy in comparison with his brute force kicks and smashes. Regardless, he worked out way more often than she did and had about 30 pounds and 10 inches on her, and he couldn't imagine arm wrestling going anything but one way. Sure, if you want. I don't know if that's, shish, she said, beaming up at him as she started clearing up the chessboard. They set up on either side of the table, Ochako stretching her arm across her chest like she was about to pitch in the World Series, eyes narrowed at him in a caricature of challenge. Izuku sat down awkwardly. resting his elbow on the table and extending his arm. She leaned forward, her pinky extended as she took his hand, and the touch paralyzed him. Her hand was small, and cool, and soft, and he immediately felt like he should apologize for having touched it with his own scarred wreck of an appendage. Ready. Go. She called, surprising him. He'd been distracted, and she managed to get his hand halfway down to the table before he even recognized the match had started. Izuku started in shock, then dug in, shifting his weight and using every muscle from his chest down to his wrist to counteract the force she was applying. He respected her too much to go easy on her, and it didn't take long for him to recover. Ochako was putting forth a valiant effort, face turning pink, her teeth gritted as she tried to put more of her weight behind her arm, but Izuku had been right. There was no way she was winning this one. Hey, Deku, she panted. He was focused on their hands as he inched hers closer and closer to the table, but he spared a look up to see her smirking at him in triumph. He felt a light touch on the back of his hand as she folded her pinky in, and gravity disappeared. Weight absent, he had no way to push back against her, and he went somersaulting out of the chair, careening towards the ceiling as she slammed his hand into the tabletop with a happy shout of victory. That's no eyes. Izuku flushed. It bore more consideration, but not now. He suddenly noticed that she was looking at him, patiently waiting for him to say something. Ah, 8. Ochako smiled. Go fish. You asked for 8s last time. I guess I'm just not very good at cards, he said, and managed to choke out a laugh. Had he been staring at her? They'd never spent this much time alone together before, certainly not without some other activity to distract them. He'd always known she was pretty, but sitting here in the dark, teasing each other and laughing, talking idly about whatever popped into their heads, he was starting to realize that she might be the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. He had to get a hold of himself. She was his friend. He owed it to her to not freak out or be weird just because she was attractive, even if she was really attractive. She'd said the snow might not melt for another day or two. That's plenty of time to get back to being normal friends, right? They'd moved from cards to chess, which was altogether kinder towards his dignity. The first 3 games, he'd managed to mate her in less than 20 moves. She was starting to get clever though. With her not falling for any of his more obvious gambits, he was only up a knight and 2 pawns. Wait, knight and 1 pawn. She'd taken one of his. When did that happen? He was considering the possibility he'd have to trade his queen when the missing pawn thumped him solidly between the eyes. Blinking through the tears that sprung up involuntarily in response, he caught a blurry vision of Ochako, trying unsuccessfully to tamp down a smile as the pawn went spinning weightlessly through the air towards the ceiling. Come on, you're so much better at this than me. Let's do something else. What? Do you want to play cards again? Aren't you getting tired of beating me? Never. She cheered. We've gotta find a game we have equal footing on, or you're going to own every piece of paper in this house. Ochako pursed her lips in thought, her expression serious as she looked around the room for inspiration. Her eyes seized on a table tucked into the corner where Izuku and his mother ate whenever they wanted to watch TV over dinner. She smiled coyly, which made his chest feel weird, and he realized abruptly that he'd been holding his breath. How about arm wrestling? The suggestion hit him like a thunderbolt. Even without his quirk, his fighting style was much more strength-based than Ochako's. He'd seen her throwing opponents over her hip, gracefully redirecting all their power against them, and felt clumsy in comparison with his brute force kicks and smashes. Regardless, he worked out way more often than she did and had about 30 pounds and 10 inches on her, and he couldn't imagine arm wrestling going anything but one way. Sure, if you want. I don't know if that's, shish, she said, beaming up at him as she started clearing up the chessboard. They sat up on either side of the table, Ochako stretching her arm across her chest like she was about to pitch in the World Series, eyes narrowed at him in a caricature of challenge. Izuku sat down awkwardly, resting his elbow on the table and extending his arm. She leaned forward, her pinky extended as she took his hand, and the touch paralyzed him. Her hand was small, and cool, and soft, and he immediately felt like he should apologize for having touched it with his own scarred wreck of an appendage. Ready, go, she called, surprising him. He'd been distracted, and she managed to get his hand halfway down to the table before he even recognized the match had started. Izuku started in shock, then dug in, shifting his weight and using every muscle from his chest down to his wrist to counteract the force she was applying. He respected her too much to go easy on her, and it didn't take long for him to recover. Ochako was putting forth a valiant effort, face turning pink, her teeth gritted as she tried to put more of her weight behind her arm, but Izuku had been right. There was no way she was winning this one. Hey, Deku, she panted. He was focused on their hands as he inched hers closer and closer to the table, but he spared a look up to see her smirking at him in triumph. He felt a light touch on the back of his hand as she folded her pinky in, and gravity disappeared. Weight absent, he had no way to push back against her, and he went somersaulting out of the chair, careening towards the ceiling as she slammed his hand into the tabletop with a happy shout of victory. That's no fair, he called down at her, trying to keep a hold of her to avoid bumping into the ceiling. She craned her neck to look up at him, smile stretched across her face. She looked unbelievably pleased with herself, laughing as she pulled away from him, leaving him drifting. You should have used your quirk first if you wanted to win. I didn't know it was allowed. He frowned at her, crossing his arms over his chest as he continued to pirouette slowly in midair. You need to pay more attention in class, Deku, she teased. Haven't you heard Mr. Aizawa say that a hero needs to use every advantage they have? You, have fun up there. She waved cheerily, unable to keep the grin off her face. You have to let me down eventually. Izuku protested. Eventually, she nodded. But I'm going to go make some food first. That's okay, right? Quote dot. I, I guess. I think it's considered rude to leave your host floating while you eat their food. Fine, I'll make you some too, she said, sticking her tongue out at him. Wait, she was already gone, scooping up a candle as she made her way back to the kitchen, glancing back at him and giggling every few steps. He sighed and slowly let a smile trickle onto his face. She'd gotten him pretty good. He couldn't just let it go unanswered though. He was a top hero in training, and he wasn't going to slink off and lick his wounds just because she'd pulled off a halfway decent trick. He waited until he'd drifted high enough to reach the ceiling, and gently pushed off of it, propelling himself towards the kitchen. He spider walked his hands along the ceiling and walls, inching his way down the dark corridor as he followed after her in complete silence. Ochako was standing in the kitchen, squinting at the inside of his pantry with the candle set to the side. He moved quietly along until he was directly over her, reoriented himself, so that his feet were pressed against the ceiling, and waited. Hey Ochako, she gasped and spun around at the noise, looking up at him. He caught a half second of shock written on her features before he kicked off the ceiling, heading straight towards her, and a smile broke across her face as she dropped into a fighting stance. She touched the pads of her fingers together, and he suddenly felt gravity reasserting itself, just barely managing to flip in midair to hit the ground in a half crouch. The effort of the landing staggered him, and she managed to snap out a quick jab while his head was down. She always led with a jab. He felt it pass by his left ear as he slipped it instinctually, hissing through his teeth as he felt it nearly impact against his cheek. They never hit hard when they sparred, but he knew from experience that even her light punches stung. She weaved another half-dozen straight lefts and rights in the air, and he managed to dodge all but one of them, which he took on the forearm. Deflecting her fist up, he made a grab for her leg, but she was anticipating that. She kicked out, and her shin crashed against his knuckles. Izuku took a step back, shaking out his hand. She didn't want to give him any time to recover and immediately pressed the attack, trying to tie him up at close range before he could use his longer arms to his advantage. He tried to shell up, but she managed to get under his guard, landing a short hook to his liver. He opened his mouth to gasp in pain, but couldn't find the air as his diaphragm shut down. She took the chance to make a grab at his torso, trying to use her quirk again, and he just barely managed to back away in time. An idea flashed through his mind, lightning quick. One for all coursed down his arm, giving him the speed he needed to catch her wrist as she reached out to grab him again, though the act of redirecting her force left his chest open. Sensing the opportunity, she immediately snapped her other hand forward, pads on her fingers striking home. He felt gravity disappear again and smiled. Still holding on to her wrist, he poured some of the power into his legs and jumped, using the grip he had on her arm to swing around over her head, pivoting in midair to come down behind her, feet planted firmly on the ground. Striking quickly, he wrapped his arms around her midsection from behind and pulled her up into the air, her weight pinning him to the floor. Got you, villain. No, she squealed, laughing uproariously as she squirmed in his grip, trying to throw him off balance. It wasn't totally ineffective. He did currently weigh nothing, which made grappling hard, but he was holding on pretty tight, and she wasn't getting free anytime soon. That was a sneaky trick. I thought a hero needs to use any advantage they can, he retorted playfully, and was rewarded with a drawn-out groan from her. What's the plan now then, hero? I'll let you go when you stop using your quirk on me. Absolutely not. You attacked a defenseless civilian who was just trying to find food and you deserve to be punished. If that's how a defenseless civilian fights, then villains are in for a lot of trouble. Your arms are gonna get tired before my quirk wears me out. Ochako, he said with mock seriousness. I am really strong. She squirmed ineffectually in his grip a little more and let out a HMPH of dissatisfaction. I can wait you out. Personally, this is pretty cozy for me. You're warm. I'm being held up. She leaned her back against his chest and let out a sigh. Maybe I'll take a nap. He hazarded a look down and immediately regretted it. She really had closed her eyes, expression slack and lazy like she was about to fall asleep. Her body was languid, pressed up against him in a way that was making it hard to think, and a helpless kind of tenderness filled him at the sight of her relaxing in his arms. He almost missed her trying to break the grapple. Taking advantage of him easing up, Ochako contorted her body violently, managing to plant a foot on his hip and used it to push off, the abrupt explosion of power and force catching him by surprise and weakening his hold on her. She reached blindly backwards, grabbing onto his shoulder to try to pull him off balance, and he had to let go with his other arm to peel her hand away. She took advantage of the lessened pressure to twist, turning 180 degrees and coming around to face him. She put her hand square on the center of his chest and pushed off, propelling herself backwards to try to get away, and almost succeeded. Izuku barely managed to adjust his hold, locking his arms tightly around her upper back. She let out a yelp of surprise and wrapped her legs around his waist to keep from sliding down. Now chest to chest, they were both panting, grinning uncontrollably at each other. Ochako's face was faintly red from exertion, and Izuku assumed that his was no better. She ducked her head, and he felt her shake against his chest, once, then twice, and he realized she was trying to stifle her laughter. All of a sudden, she erupted with a belly laugh that would have caused her to double over if it weren't for the fact he was holding her. Instead, he got a face full of her hair as she headbutted his chin. That was enough for him. He started laughing too, body shaking with convulsive chuckles that slowly petered away. As their giggles subsided, Ochako leaned her head towards him and he met her halfway, pressing their foreheads together, both of them still smiling. Self-control was slipping. Her arms were looped around his neck, and Izuku realized with a start that he was holding her up by her hips, fingertips making indentations in the soft skin that her shirt riding up had exposed. He blinked and let his eyes travel up, past her slightly parted lips curved in a gentle smile and her cheeks still flushed with the effort of the fight, and met her gaze. Ochako's eyes were deep brown and sparkling with happy tears, and he knew suddenly with absolute, unwavering certainty that he wanted to kiss her more than he'd ever wanted anything. The realization stopped him in his tracks. Wait, what? He dropped her in surprise. Where stories live. Discover now.